Ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank you for coming here for an important announcement today. York is one of the greatest cities in the world to live and work. Our employment is less than the regional and national average. Education attainment is high. Our economy is predicted to grow faster than the national average, and the quality of life is second to none. It has a beautiful natural and built environment. All these things must be protected and promoted. They are what makes York a unique and special place. We are proud of our heritage, but we are also ambitious about the future. And I've said before, this administration is focused on strengthening the local economy and increasing jobs. We want the poorest in our society to be able to prosper. Since coming to office, we have helped bring John Lewis to York and the national insurance firm Hiscox. We stand squarely behind the developments at Monk's Cross, and we are taking measures to promote and improve the city centre. But York has a very specific and acute problem. The homes crisis started before we came to office, but has continued during these tough times. This crisis has been covered very well throughout the Press Stamp Out Poverty campaign, and the press have rightly demanded action. The average house price in York in 2011 was 6.8 times the average income, much higher than the regional average. It is estimated that in order to afford a mortgage for a house in the cheapest 25% of those sold, you need a household income of over £58,000, well over twice the median average income. Rents are also expensive. The Valuation Office put the average rent for a bedsit in York in December 2011 at over £100 a week. A widely used indicator says that housing costs should not amount to more than 25% of a household's gross income. However, in York, even a typical one-bedroom property costs about £124 per week, meaning that someone would need an income of just under £26,000 per year to afford this. That's £6,000 a year more than the median average household income for people who rent. It would be an easy option to give a politician's answer to say that this is nothing new, that somehow these problems can be wished away. But let's not kid ourselves, the situation is getting worse. In 2010-11, City of York Council gave support and advice on housing issues to 1,900 people. In the first 6 months of 2011-12, 1,668 people asked for advice, indicating an increase of the number of people needing help over the course of the full year of nearly 60%. Last year, the housing charity Cllr published a report indicating that York has the least affordable rents in Yorkshire and Humber, and more on a par with the southeast of England. And the government's welfare reforms are making a bad situation worse. Many people who rent are also being hit by the government's new rules on housing benefit. Residents are not only losing hope of owning their own home, they are even losing hope of renting. We have announced some funding to build new council houses and to expand existing properties to help families in overcrowded conditions. But as the York Labour Party has been running a campaign for more affordable housing, residents have told us of their fears. They said, we've given up hope of ever being able to afford to buy. As someone who comes from the generation priced out of the housing market, as well as a local councillor who hears the housing concerns of residents week in and week out, I know that sentiment all too well. Another comment was York is a great place to live, and that is exploited somewhat, making it unaffordable even to those like me who work 2 jobs. Another person told us, there is little property I can afford in York, even if I could raise the deposit. Instead I'm renting, and even this is costly in York, with few properties available below £500 a month. My administration was elected in May 2011 with a manifesto that pledged to deliver more affordable housing with consultation. It is wrong that people who were born and raised in York cannot afford to own their own homes. New house building projects will support the local building trade and will be carried out in full consultation with residents. Of course, you can't build new homes unless there is land to build them on. This has been the repeated message of the house building sector and the Chamber that have been meeting with me regularly since coming to office. Equally, as the Planning Minister made very clear to me again recently, without a local plan for York in the next 18 months, planning restrictions for York's draft Greenbelt will be lifted and we could well have uncontrolled development across green land. To comply with the government's national planning policy framework, we must provide housing supply for the demand we see. We want to see more homes being built, but it's important that this is done in a considered and careful way so as to protect the character of our unique city. Only with proper local plan will areas that have been considered to be greenbelt actually be defined and protected. So today I announce my administration's decision to consult the public on a local plan which will see development for the next 15 years and beyond. In order to secure the sustainable and appropriate development that York needs, we are proposing to allocate an additional 1.8% of greenbelt land over and above what was previous draft LDF for the developable purposes over the next 15 years. This is 403 hectares. Not only will this expand on the Get York building announcements we've made previously, but it will also underpin our economy through both construction jobs and stemming the ever-increasing housing element of the cost of living. For every £1 spent on construction, £3 is spent on economic activity. The government has begun to realise what my party has been saying for some time, that the economy will not pick up without investment in construction, investment in infrastructure and investment in building homes. York's local plan will deliver 1,090 new homes a year, of which considerable numbers will be affordable homes. It is an increase on the number of people I've talked about previously, but in retrospect, we now know that the numbers were not realistic. We're proposing the minimum of new homes required to match demographic need and our expected economic growth. These homes will be privately owned, privately rented, social housing and council housing. York's local plan seeks to promote more sustainable and higher quality design of new developments, with good bus and cycle access and lower traffic generation, ensuring there are adequate local community facilities and open spaces. The quality of life for residents is a key concern for us. When it is adopted, York's local plan will define York's greenbelt for the first time and protects green land for generations. The local plan protects the beautiful views of city at points of entry and from the outer ring road. It also looks to protect and enhance our rich collection of historic buildings and monuments and multiple conservation areas. York's local plan will protect that sense of place and our heritage. The plan also makes provision for 20 new business sites, potentially delivering 16,000 jobs over the 15-year period. And what is the alternative? Home ownership being a luxury of the wealthy, rents increasing beyond people's ability to pay, and York people forced to leave their city. Not being able to attract the quality jobs and investment that the next generation needs. That would not be right. Nick Bowles, the planning minister, has observed these plans, and he says there is a moral obligation to try to provide more homes. On this, I agree with him. Understandably, some people will say use brownfield sites instead. But York's total brownfield sites cannot accommodate York's current homes need, let alone future need. To say use brownfield sites instead is misleading. It would mean worsening the housing shortage, ever higher house prices and rents, and intensification of the homes crisis we face today. So to recap, in announcing our consultation on this local plan, we've applied 3 tests. Does it protect the character of our unique city and its environment? Does it support jobs and the economy of the future? And does it secure the future here for York's families? We believe that the plan we are proposing does all 3 things. Ladies and gentlemen, my administration will not shy away from the tough decisions York needs. Today is about putting into action my administration's vision of a York proud of our heritage and ambitious for our future. This is about jobs and growth and homes for York residents. And thank you for listening.
So we're open to questions now. We've got talking here about a lot of detail about the housing sites and potential housing sites over the next 15 years and beyond. Obviously, with alongside new housing, there has to be elements of additional infrastructure, specifically on transport links and potentially new schools. If we're talking about new residents. In terms of transport, I realise that there are a number of new stations, including the one at York Business Park, Haxby and Stransea, but in terms of transport infrastructure, what are the key elements of the options that you've laid out in this?
Okay. Basically, we're tackling it in 2 ways. We will need to improve the capacity of the Northern Ring Road in particular. We are working, as you will be aware, Mark, with the West Yorkshire Transport Plus Fund, and we are hoping that when the proposals are confirmed, that we will be able to do major upgrades of 5 of the key roundabouts on the Northern Ring Road, which will give us early capacity. In terms of the longer term part of the plan, we will be looking to introduce additional dually and grade separation of junctions on the Ring Road, so that we do have the capacity to absorb the additional development that's proposed on that side of the city. Within the city, as has long been the policy, we need to concentrate on alternative means of getting people about, given there's a constrained road network, and that will see us investing heavily both in the park and rides in terms of pulling people, getting people out of their cars on the edge of the city, coming in on the park and ride to the city centre or wherever. Within the city, improving public transport so that there's a much better offer, more reliable offer by appropriate demand management and traffic control measures. The plan also envisages us providing a proper bus interchange at the rail station, so there's actually a much better relationship for people arriving by train and enable them to use local public transport. As a growing city, as with cities elsewhere, the bigger you are, the more that you do need to rely on public transport. But also developing that strategic cycling network that has been our ambition for 20 odd years, and closing the gaps and ensuring it has the continuity and quality that will make it attractive to some of the people who at the moment are willing to cycle but choose not to because the facilities aren't up to scratch to the degree that they'd like to see. So there's a broad raft of measures in terms of, I think obviously in terms of particular sites, we will also need to look at the infrastructure for actually servicing those sites and appropriately measures. You mentioned also the stations. We hope over the plan period and beyond to achieve all of those stations, although it's a long and torturous process in terms of negotiating with the rail industry, as I think you're aware.
We've also tried to ensure that there are some developments of significant scale so that can actually underpin the infrastructure and the transport links that are required. Because the problem with going with a number of smaller sites is you simply can't get that critical mass, and it just adds to the transport infrastructure situation. So one of the large sites is the Home Hill development, which is south of Heslington and north of Elvington Airfield. And that we're looking at a brand new community of 5,000 homes.
Just in terms of schools as well, if you're going to have an influx of new residents, obviously, you could, or presumably, you would need to look at potential new schools. Is that addressed within the plan, or is that going to be from a separate point, a separate issue?
No, that is addressed in the plan. It's well recognised in the education chapter, and again, it comes back to the point James has just been making, that by concentrating on larger sites, the ability to actually fund new infrastructure, including education and the other sort of community facilities, becomes possible with that scale of development.
Leader, if I may just add, Mark, you said about an influx of new residents. This is not primarily about an influx of new residents. This is about meeting the growth in the population of York, and it's about the children that are growing up now being able to have homes in the future. But it's not exclusively, it's primarily about that.
It's also about the fact that people are living longer, people are staying in their own homes longer, and also the way that we live has actually changed over the last few decades. So nationally, about a third of the population is now single households, which is a huge change to how we envisaged people living in homes in the past. So we've had to take all those factors into consideration.
I mean, politicians hate it when they're advised that plans are bold, because it means that they're risky. And it has been said by people that plans are bold, but they're not really bold when you look at the needs that's required. They have a huge backlog of people who need homes now, and this tries to address that situation, as well as the growth in homes that are required for the future for York residents. We know York is an attractive place to live and so on, but the 800 homes that we were looking at previously through the LDF, the planning inspector already said the housing trajectory didn't stack up. And that's partly because there wasn't the deliverability on the sites that were required. So that means you have to put in more land allocations to even deal with those 800 homes. Now, when you look at the situation with the National Planning Policy Framework, and you're making sure that the economic growth that we have and is predicted is actually underpinned and serviced, then you have to put the new land in, no matter how difficult that decision may be. But we have done our best to protect the scene setting of the city, the heritage, and to finally define our green belt for the first time, because without that we will have uncontrolled development in the green belt, and this is a way of making sure that this stacks up. And I have spoken to Julian Sturdy about that this morning and made that argument.
You mentioned about the green belts. Obviously the plans do include, even if they go ahead, some developments within the green belt, and you mentioned in there's an increase in the amount of over 1.8%, I think. Is that a 403 hectare increase?
Yeah, it's a 403 hectare increase from the draft LDF, which is a 1.8% allocation of draft green belt land. But I must stress that's draft green belt. York doesn't have a green belt at the moment, that's a difficult decision. But we know that more land is required, and that's why we've gone ahead and done this. We need a credible plan that stacks up. Can't be in a situation where the plan's uncredible, doesn't stack up, has to be withdrawn, and then we end up in a situation where we've got uncontrolled developments. That is not in York's interest, socially or economically.
So what you're saying is if we have to build land in the green belt, it's better that it's controlled rather than the current situation where technically it's going to build anyway.
Yes. That's the position I made to Julian, because obviously he has some concerns about that, and his argument back was, well, he disagrees with the MPFF, but that's fine, but I can't really change government legislation. What we can do is comply with government legislation to make sure that we have the adequate protections required, while still underpinning the moral argument that Conservative ministers are making, and I agree with them, on the need for housing, as well as underpinning that economy and the construction jobs.